There are moments in life when we find ourselves standing in front of doors. These doors represent opportunities, challenges, and decisions that determine the course of our lives. Every day we face choices, and each choice can either open a new path or close off a possibility. And often in those moments when the door before us seems impossible to open, we wonder why it's closed, what it means, and whether we'll ever find the strength or wisdom to walk through the right door. It's in these moments when we're standing at the threshold of the unknown that we must come to terms with one powerful truth. Sometimes it's not about us forcing our way in. Sometimes it's about letting God open the right door. How many of us have found ourselves pushing, striving, and struggling against a door that just wouldn't open? We knock, we try the handle, we push with all our might, and yet the door remains locked. Our hearts are filled with frustration and our minds are full of questions. Why isn't it opening? Am I not good enough? Did I miss the sign? In those moments, we need to remember that God knows what lies on the other side of that door. He knows if it's the right door or the wrong one. He knows if it's the moment we should step through or if we need to wait for a different door to open. We live in a world that constantly pressures us to make decisions fast. The clock ticks, the noise grows louder, and we are told that if we don't seize the opportunity right now, we'll miss out. But the truth is, we cannot force doors open that were never meant to open. We cannot manufacture success on our own terms, and we cannot control every outcome. There is a wisdom that transcends our understanding, a divine insight that sees the bigger picture. And it is this wisdom that we must trust. In the Bible, we are reminded that God opens doors that no one can shut, and he shuts doors that no one can open. This is not just a metaphor, it is a principle that governs our lives. We may not understand why certain doors close, but we can trust that there is a purpose behind every closed door. Sometimes it's not about what we want. It's about what God has planned for us. Sometimes the closed door is not a rejection, but a redirect. It's not a denial, it's a divine shift that leads us to something greater than we could have ever imagined. There are moments when the door in front of us seems to be locked tight, and we feel as though our dreams are slipping away. But here's the key to understanding. Not every door is meant for you to walk through. Just because a door is there doesn't mean it's the right one for you. Just because an opportunity arises doesn't mean it's your time to seize it. In the same way that a door may not open when you push it, sometimes God is waiting for you to stand still and trust that he will open the door at the right time. Your journey is not defined by the doors you open, but by the ones that God opens for you. Think about the doors in your life that have remained closed. Perhaps you've felt the sting of rejection, or you've watched others walk through doors that you thought were meant for you. It's easy to get discouraged, to feel like you're being overlooked or that your time will never come. But let me tell you something, the right door will always open at the right time. When God is in control of your path, nothing can stand in your way. He sees beyond what you can see, and he knows what you need before you even ask. The question isn't whether the door will open, but when it will open, and whether you're ready to step through when it does. It is in those moments when we are waiting, when we are unsure of which door to walk through, that we need to let go of our own timelines and trust that God's timing is perfect. We may feel impatient, we may grow tired, and we may wonder if we've missed our chance. But God's timing is not bound by our schedules. He works in seasons. He moves when the time is right. And when he opens a door for you, no one can close it. No circumstance, no person, no setback can stop what God has ordained for you. We also need to understand that sometimes the right door isn't the one that looks the most appealing from the outside. In our limited perspective, we often look for the door that promises the most comfort, the quickest success, or the easiest path. But God, in his infinite wisdom, knows that growth often comes through struggle, and strength is built through challenge. The right door may not always be the one that looks the most promising at first glance, but it will always be the one that leads you to your destiny. It may require patience, perseverance, and faith, but when you walk through it, you will see that it was the door you were meant to open all along. There's another truth we must remember. Sometimes the right door requires us to let go of something we thought we couldn't live without. There are things in our lives that we hold on to so tightly, whether it's a relationship, a job, a dream, or even our own plans, that we resist walking through the door that God has for us. Letting go can be painful. It can feel like we're losing something precious, but in reality, God is making room for something better. The right door is not always the easiest one to walk through, but it's the one that leads us to the life we were created to live. When we allow God to open the right door, we are stepping into a future that is designed with purpose. We are aligning ourselves with the plan He has for our lives, and we are trusting that He knows the way. It is not always easy to wait for the right door to open, but we must trust that when it does, it will be worth the wait. The door that God opens will be the one that brings us closer to our purpose, to our dreams, and to the life we are meant to live. You see, the journey is not about us trying to make things happen on our own. It's about surrendering to God's will and trusting that He will lead us exactly where we need to go. We may not always understand why a door is closed or why a particular opportunity doesn't come our way, but we must trust that God is always working behind the scenes. He is orchestrating every step, every detail, and every moment to bring us into alignment with His perfect plan. And when the right door opens, it will be clear that it was His hand that guided us to it. In moments of uncertainty, when the doors seem to be locked and the path ahead seems unclear, let God open the right door. Trust that He is in control. Know that He is working things out for your good, even when you can't see it. Sometimes the right door requires us to be still, to wait with faith, and to believe that God is leading us to the place we are meant to be. So my friends, don't be discouraged by the closed doors in your life. Don't be disheartened by the opportunities that have slipped away. Instead, stand in faith, knowing that the right door is out there. And when God opens it for you, walk through it with confidence, knowing that you are stepping into the future He has prepared for you. The right door is not just a chance, it's a promise. And when God opens it, you will know that it was the one you were meant to walk through all along. Sometimes closed doors or missed opportunities are part of God's plan, redirecting us to the right path. Trusting that He knows when and which doors to open allows us to align with His perfect timing. Not every opportunity is the right one, and sometimes what seems appealing may not be part of God's purpose for your life. The right door may require patience, faith, and the willingness to let go of things that are no longer meant for you. Rather than forcing doors open, we are called to surrender our plans and trust that God's doors, when they open, will lead us toward our true purpose. His wisdom surpasses our own, and the doors He opens lead to our destiny. In our fast-paced, goal-oriented world, we often find ourselves growing impatient when things don't happen according to our own schedules. We set out with goals, with dreams, and we expect to see immediate results, but life doesn't always work that way. There are moments when we face closed doors, missed opportunities, and unforeseen delays, and in those times, it's easy to become frustrated, to question whether we're on the right path, or to wonder if we've made a wrong turn. Yet it is in these moments that we must learn to trust in God's timing and guidance, understanding that there is a greater plan at work that we cannot always see. God's timing is unlike our own. We operate within the framework of minutes, hours, days, and years. We measure success based on milestones and deadlines, and we expect things to move quickly. But God operates on an eternal timeline, one that is not bound by the constraints of time. He sees the bigger picture, past, present, and future, and knows exactly when each door needs to open, when each opportunity should arise, and when we are ready to step into the next phase of our lives. One of the hardest things we face as humans is surrendering control. We want to know the how and the when. We want to be able to plan every detail and ensure that our efforts are rewarded immediately. But God calls us to trust not in our own understanding, but in His. Proverbs 3:05 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him and he will make your paths straight. This is a call to trust that even when we don't see the way forward, God is already working it out. His guidance is steady, reliable, and always leads us in the direction we need to go. There are times when we feel like the doors we're knocking on are too heavy, too locked, or simply too far out of reach. We try again and again, pushing with all our might, only to face disappointment. But what if, instead of forcing our way through, we pause to ask God for his guidance? What if we surrendered our desire for immediate results and waited for the right door to open at the right time? When we step back and trust in God's timing, we allow him to lead us to the opportunities that are meant for us at the time that is best for us. Sometimes the closed door is a blessing in disguise. It might not be the right season for that opportunity, and God, in his infinite wisdom, is protecting us from stepping into something that could lead us down the wrong path. God's guidance often comes in subtle ways. It may not always be an audible voice, but it is felt through a sense of peace or a lack of peace. Sometimes God closes doors not because he wants to keep us from something, but because he is guiding us to something better. We may not understand why the path ahead seems blocked or why an opportunity we thought was perfect slips through our fingers, but when we trust that God has a purpose, we can rest in the confidence that he is working behind the scenes. Even in moments of uncertainty, he is in control. The doors we are meant to walk through will open at the right time, and those that are not part of our journey will remain closed. One of the most profound lessons in trusting God's timing comes from the story of Abraham and Sarah. When God promised Abraham that he would become the father of many nations, it seemed impossible. Abraham and Sarah were well beyond the age of having children, yet God's promise remained. They waited and still nothing happened. In their impatience, Sarah took matters into her own hands and encouraged Abraham to have a child with her servant Hagar. But that decision only led to complications and heartache. God had a plan, but his plan didn't unfold according to their timeline. When they were finally able to conceive after years of waiting and questioning, it became clear that God's timing was perfect. Isaac was born when it was humanly impossible, and through him, the promise to Abraham was fulfilled. This story teaches us that waiting on God's timing isn't a passive act. It's an active trust in his ability to bring about his promises when the time is right. Sometimes God's timing requires us to wait longer than we expect, but that wait is never in vain. We may feel discouraged in the waiting, but it is in these seasons of waiting that God is refining us, preparing us for what's to come. The waiting room is not a place of wasted time. It is a place where we are being shaped, where our character is being tested, and where our faith is being strengthened. When we learn to wait on God, we learn to rely on his wisdom, his strength, and his ability to see what we cannot. In addition to trusting God's timing, we must also trust in his guidance. We may want a certain path, but God sees the path that leads to our true purpose. He may redirect us, close a door, or lead us in a direction that seems unexpected, but his guidance is always for our good. Psalm 23:03 reminds us that God leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. God's guidance is not random, it is intentional. He leads us in the way that is best for us, even when we don't understand the reasons behind his guidance. Learning to follow God's guidance requires surrender. It means letting go of our own agendas, our own desires, and trusting that he knows what is best. It means allowing him to direct our steps, even when we cannot see the full picture. As we walk in step with him, he will illuminate the way forward. And though we may not always understand why he is guiding us in a particular direction, we can be sure that he is leading us towards something good. God's guidance can also come in the form of other people, circumstances, and even our inner peace or unrest. He speaks to us through his word, through the counsel of others, and through the Holy Spirit who lives within us. When we learn to listen attentively to his voice and recognize the signs he gives, we can confidently step forward in faith. Sometimes God's guidance comes as a gentle nudge, a quiet whisper in our hearts, prompting us to make a decision or take a step. Other times it may come as a clear and unmistakable leading. But regardless of how it comes, we must be willing to listen and obey. In our journey of faith, trusting in God's timing and guidance is essential. We must remember that He is never late, nor is He early. He is always right on time. When we trust in His perfect timing, we free ourselves from the burden of anxiety, impatience, and fear. We recognize that our lives are in His hands, and He will guide us to the right opportunities, open the right doors, and close the ones that aren't meant for us. We may not understand His ways, but we can rest assured that His ways are always for our good and His glory. So, as we walk this journey of life, let us choose to trust in God's timing and guidance. Let us surrender our plans and our timelines to Him, knowing that He is in control and will lead us exactly where we need to go. Even in the moments of uncertainty and waiting, let us hold fast to the belief that God's timing is always perfect and His guidance is always trustworthy. When we trust Him fully, we can walk in the peace that only He can provide, knowing that the doors we need to walk through will open in His perfect time. In life, we are often presented with numerous opportunities, each one seemingly an open door that promises to lead us to something better. We are encouraged to take chances, to push forward, and to make the most of every opportunity that comes our way. But as we walk through the journey of life, we quickly learn a crucial truth. Not all doors are meant for us. While some doors might look inviting, others may seem promising or even urgent. It's important to realize that just because a door is open doesn't mean it's the right door for us to walk through. There are countless moments when we stand in front of a door, hopeful and eager to move forward. We can see the potential on the other side, the success, the joy, or the fulfillment that awaits us if only we could enter. We may feel an overwhelming desire to push through, to rush into the opportunity, to take the chance, and to move toward what seems like a bright future. But what happens when after stepping through that door, we find ourselves in a place that is not as fulfilling as we imagined? What if instead of bringing us peace, it leaves us anxious, confused, or regretful? It is in these moments of disillusionment that we must come to terms with the truth that not every door we encounter is meant for us. We live in a world that often prioritizes speed, success, and external achievements. We are told to go after what we want, to grab opportunities as they come, and to make the most of every chance. But in this pursuit, we sometimes overlook the importance of discernment. We might rush through doors that, in the long run, don't align with our true purpose or calling. While this approach might bring short-term gains or temporary satisfaction, it does not always lead to lasting fulfillment. The truth is that some doors, even though they appear to be open and promising, are simply not part of the path God has laid out for us. God knows what lies behind each door, and He sees beyond what we can see. There are doors that seem attractive on the surface, but in reality could lead us down paths that are not in our best interest. There are also doors that at first glance may appear uninviting or unimportant, but they hold the key to our growth, purpose, and destiny. When we blindly chase after every door that opens, we may miss out on the doors that truly matter, the ones that align with our values, our calling, and our long-term happiness. Sometimes we must learn to let go of the doors that are not meant for us, even when they seem like the perfect opportunity at the time. One of the most difficult things to accept in life is that not every opportunity is a blessing, and not every open door is a gift. We might look at someone else's success and believe that we should be pursuing the same path. We might see a door opening for someone else and think, that's what I want. But the reality is that their journey is not the same as ours. Their door may not be our door. Their success may not be our success. And their path may not be our path. In fact, comparing ourselves to others can often blind us to the doors that are meant for us. We may overlook the opportunities that align with our own gifts and passions because we are so focused on following someone else's footsteps. We see this truth reflected in the lives of many biblical figures. Take, for example, King David. As a young shepherd, David was anointed by God to be the future king of Israel, yet his path to the throne was far from easy. He was faced with many doors that seemed like opportunities, but not all of them were meant for him. At one point, David was presented with the opportunity to kill King Saul, who was pursuing him. His followers encouraged him to take this open door, believing that it was the perfect chance for David to seize the throne. But David, in his wisdom and trust in God, refused to take that path, understanding that it was not his place to force the door open. He knew that God's timing was perfect and that the throne would come to him in God's way, not by his own hand. In the end, David waited for the right door to open, and when it did, he walked into his destiny as the king of Israel. David's story teaches us that patience and discernment are essential when facing the doors of life. Not every door that opens is meant for us to walk through, and not every opportunity is part of the plan that God has for us. Sometimes the best thing we can do is wait for God to show us the right door, the one that leads us toward our true purpose and calling. There is also a sense of peace and clarity that comes with knowing which doors are meant for us. When we walk through the doors that align with our values, our passions, and our gifts, we feel a sense of fulfillment and contentment that cannot be found in the pursuit of every opportunity that comes our way. God, in his wisdom, knows exactly what we need and when we need it. His timing is perfect, and his plan is always better than our own. When we trust that he is leading us to the right doors, we can move forward with confidence and peace, knowing that we are on the right path. However, it's not always easy to recognize the right doors. Life often presents us with many choices, and sometimes the lines between what is right and what is wrong can be blurry. In these moments, it's important to take a step back, reflect on our values, and seek guidance through prayer and discernment. We must ask ourselves, does this opportunity align with who I am? Does it reflect my true passions and purpose? Does it bring me closer to the person I want to become? These questions can help us determine whether a door is meant for us or if it is simply a distraction. We must also be willing to accept that sometimes the right door will not be the one we expect. God's plans often unfold in unexpected ways, and the doors he opens for us may not always be the ones we envision. Sometimes the right door requires us to step outside our comfort zone, to take a path that is unfamiliar or even uncomfortable. But it is in those moments of stepping into the unknown that we often find the greatest growth, transformation, and fulfillment. Letting go of doors that are not meant for us can be painful. It requires us to confront our own desires, fears, and insecurities. It may mean walking away from relationships, jobs, or dreams that we thought were meant to be a part of our story. But in the end, letting go of the wrong doors makes room for the right ones. When we stop chasing every opportunity that comes our way, we open ourselves up to the doors that truly align with our purpose and calling. In life, there will be many doors. Some that seem like the right choice, others that seem less inviting, and still others that are closed entirely. The key is to trust that God knows which doors are meant for us and to have the discernment to walk through the ones that will lead us to the life we were created to live. Not every door will be the right one, and that's okay. The important thing is to keep seeking, trusting, and waiting for the doors that God is opening for you, knowing that they will lead you exactly where you need to go. When you learn to let go of the doors that aren't meant for you, you make room for the doors that will truly bring you joy, peace, and purpose. Surrendering to God's will is one of the most profound acts of faith a person can experience. In a world where we are often taught to assert our own desires, push forward with determination, and take control of every aspect of our lives, the idea of surrender can seem counterintuitive. We are conditioned to believe that our success, happiness, and fulfillment are entirely in our hands, and it is through our own efforts, choices, and decisions that we carve our path forward. However, true peace and purpose come not from our own striving, but from the deep trust and surrender to a greater plan, a plan that God has already set in motion for us. To surrender to God's will is to acknowledge that we are not the ultimate authors of our own stories. It is a humble recognition that God knows what is best for us, even when we cannot fully comprehend the reasons behind his guidance. It requires a shift in mindset from one that clings tightly to control to one that releases fear and uncertainty into the hands of a loving, all-knowing creator. Surrender is not about passive resignation. Rather, it is an active choice to place our trust in God, to align our desires with his, and to accept his leadership over our lives. There is a common misconception that surrendering to God means giving up our own will and losing our sense of agency. Some may fear that surrender will strip them of their identity, desires, or passions. But the truth is that surrendering to God's will does not mean abandoning our individuality. On the contrary, it means allowing God to help us discover who we truly are. Our identity is found in him, and when we surrender to his guidance, we begin to live according to the purpose for which we were created. Surrendering our will to God is the ultimate act of faith because it means trusting that his purpose for us is far greater than any path we could choose on our own. One of the most difficult aspects of surrender is the fear of the unknown. We can't predict the future or see what lies ahead, and that can be uncertain. When we surrender our will to God, we are giving up our control over the outcome. This requires vulnerability and trust. Trust that God is good, trust that he will lead us toward the right opportunities, and trust that he will be with us through every trial and triumph. It is only by letting go of our need to control the outcome that we can fully experience the freedom that comes from surrender. The beauty of surrender is that it frees us from the weight of constant worry, fear, and self-doubt. It allows us to rest in the knowledge that we are not alone in our journey. God is leading us every step of the way. The act of surrender is not a one-time decision, but a continual process. It requires a daily commitment to lay down our desires, fears, and ambitions before God. Jesus himself modeled this kind of surrender in his life. In the Garden of Gethsemane, just before his arrest and crucifixion, he prayed, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." Luke 22:42. Even though he knew the suffering that awaited him, Jesus chose to submit his will to the Father's plan. This act of surrender, despite the anguish he felt, was the ultimate expression of faith and trust in God's perfect plan. Surrendering to God's will often requires us to give up the things we think we want in exchange for what he knows is best for us. It is in these moments of letting go that we experience the fullness of God's blessings. We may struggle with the idea of relinquishing control, but it is only by surrendering that we open ourselves up to the transformative power of God's love and grace. We may not always understand why God leads us in a certain direction or why he allows certain trials to come our way, but surrendering to his will means trusting that he is working all things for our good. Romans 8:28 reminds us, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." This verse does not promise that life will be easy or free of pain, but it assures us that God's plan is always for our ultimate good. There are many times when we face difficult decisions or crossroads in life. We may be unsure of which direction to take, and the choices before us can feel overwhelming. This is where surrender becomes especially important. Surrendering to God's will means seeking his guidance in every situation, not relying solely on our own understanding or desires. When we place our trust in him, we open ourselves up to his wisdom and discernment. Proverbs 3:5-6 tells us, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight." In surrendering to God, we acknowledge that we are not wise enough to navigate life on our own. We invite God to guide our decisions, knowing that his wisdom far exceeds our own. At times, God's will may seem unclear, or we may not immediately see the purpose behind a particular situation. However, We are called to trust in His timing. Surrendering to God's will means accepting that His timing is perfect, even when it feels like things are moving too slowly or not according to our expectations. We live in a world that demands instant results and immediate gratification, but God often works in seasons, and His timing is not bound by the pressures of the world. When we surrender to His will, we choose to wait patiently for His perfect timing, knowing that He is always faithful to fulfill His promises. Surrendering to God's will also means accepting that His path for us may not always align with the desires we hold for ourselves. We may have a vision of the life we want to live, the career we wish to pursue, or the relationships we hope to have, but God's plan might look different. Surrender requires us to relinquish our own expectations and trust that God's plan is better than anything we could have imagined for ourselves. This doesn't mean that our dreams are irrelevant. Instead, it means that God will fulfill our deepest desires in His way and in His time. We may not always understand why certain doors close or why some of our hopes remain unfulfilled, but when we surrender to His will, we trust that He is leading us towards something greater. Throughout the Bible, we see countless examples of people who surrendered their wills to God and experienced the blessings that followed. Abraham surrendered his own desires and left everything behind to follow God's call to a new land. Joseph surrendered to God's plan even when his life took unexpected and painful turns, and he was ultimately elevated to a position of great influence. Mary, the mother of Jesus, surrendered her life to God's will when she agreed to bear the Son of God. Despite the challenges and uncertainties that lay ahead, these individuals chose to trust God even when they did not fully understand the journey before them. Their stories remind us that surrendering to God's will is not a sign of weakness, but a demonstration of strength, courage, and faith. As we surrender to God's will, we may experience moments of doubt and fear, but it is in those moments that we must lean into His presence and trust that He is guiding us. Surrender does not mean that we stop making decisions or that we passively wait for life to unfold. Rather, it means that we actively seek God's will in every decision we make, acknowledging that His plan for us is always good, even when we cannot see the full picture. When we surrender to God's will, we find a peace that surpasses understanding. It is the peace that comes from knowing that we are not in control, but that the one who created us is guiding our steps. We can face challenges with confidence, knowing that God is with us every step of the way, and that His will for our lives will always lead us to the place where we can fulfill our true purpose. Surrendering to God's will is not about giving up. It's about gaining everything that He has promised. It's about trusting that His way is the best way, and that in surrender, we find true freedom and fulfillment.